It's the evening of the banquet celebration on the coronation day of Macbeth. The guests are all met. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are there leading the proceedings. But where's Banquo? Suddenly, Macbeth sees Banquo. It's not the real Banquo though, it's Banquo's ghost sitting in Macbeth's seat. There follows a complete public meltdown of Macbeth as he talks to the ghost, and Lady Macbeth has to ask all the guests to leave. It's a key scene in the play. It's the moment when everybody realises something is wrong with Macbeth's rule and starts to suspect him. And that is the brilliant Act 3, Scene 4 of Macbeth. At the start of the scene, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are playing their roles with great pomp and majesty. You know, Macbeth refers to himself as ourself, using the royal we. And he says to all his guests that,
"You know your own degrees, sit down."
You know where you belong, sit down. He's saying there's a hierarchy here and I'm at the top of it. There's something kind of dictatorial about what he's saying there, and there's also something very confident about it. But then in comes the murderer, and Macbeth scurries off to the side of the room to find out what's happened. Did the murderers manage to get rid of Banquo and Fleance? And we immediately see that it's going to be really difficult for him to maintain this public, confident persona and keep all the plotting hidden from his guests. I mean, if that murderer is coming into the banquet to tell him things on the side, how can he possibly keep the public face and the private plotter separate? In the Kurzel version with Fassbender as Macbeth, he doesn't even try to. There's a sense that he's such a tyrant already that he doesn't even need to pretend to hide the fact that he's had some murderers go out and do his bidding. And so he talks to this murderer quite publicly, really, and he's confident that he will just be respected anyway. But in other versions, he runs off to the side and he's kind of speaking in corners. So it's quite interesting to see how this scene is played by different directors. When the murderer reveals that Fleance escaped, that really causes problems for Macbeth. He says,
"I had else been perfect, but now I'm cabin-cribbed, confined, bound into saucy doubts and fears."
Those harsh alliterative K sounds, cabin, cribbed, confined, even suggest anger at the fact that Fleance has got away. He's not been able to get rid of him. He's not been able to carry out his full plot. But he does seem satisfied that Banquo's in the ground.
"There the grown serpent lies. The worm that's fled hath nature that in time will venom breed, no teeth for the present."
He refers to Banquo probably for the second time, if we take his reference to snakes in Act 3, Scene 2 as a reference to Banquo, as a serpent, a snake, kind of creature of evil. And he refers to Fleance as a worm. He's really using zoomorphism there, isn't he? Snake, worm. He's dehumanising his opponents because, Banquo is now his opponent for power. And that really makes him seem quite psychopathic in the eyes of the audience, doesn't it? Psychopaths are the kinds of people who dehumanise their victims so that they won't have to have any empathy for them. And we really see this kind of dark side of Macbeth here. Lady Macbeth, as often in this play, is the one who's trying to keep things together. She says to Macbeth, "Hey, come on, get away from that murderer and come back here and let's raise a toast." So even though in Act 3, Scene 2, we saw that she was starting to become weaker in their private conversation between Macbeth and her, here in public, she's still actually the strong one, isn't she? She's the one who's able to hold it together. She's the one who's able to bring him into the role he needs to be in. This is a banquet, you need to be raising a toast. So she's got that kind of control to her still, which is kind of, makes her feel like someone we can respect in their relationship, at least in terms of being able to hold it together. But she's not successful. There's this rather distasteful moment in the audience's eyes where Macbeth starts to have a go at Banquo for not being there at the banquet when he says,
"Banquo, who may I rather challenge for unkindness than pity for mischance."
I'm challenging him. He's been unkind. He's unkind in not being here. I'm not going to show him any pity thinking that something bad might have happened to him. Terrible dramatic irony there. The audience knows that he's been murdered. We saw it happen in the previous scene. And it's really nasty, isn't it, that Macbeth kind of turns on Banquo, knowing full well that he's had him murdered. But revenge is not long in coming, and it comes in the form of Banquo's ghost. The ghost appears only to Macbeth. Macbeth's looking around at the table. Lennox said, here's a place reserved for you, sit down. Macbeth says there's no spare seat. And that's because Banquo has appeared to him in his seat. Now, let's just talk for a moment about ghosts and what they would have meant in the early modern period, what they would have meant to a Jacobean audience. Some audience members might believe that the witches could have possibly placed this ghost there to taunt Macbeth. That's a possible interpretation. Probably a lot of the audience members would have believed in the ghost beliefs of the day, which is that ghosts did exist and they could come back from the dead, and that they might come back just to show themselves to one person, and that they might often come back to taunt the person who had murdered them. So everything happening here on the stage is really in sync with the beliefs of the day, and Jacobean audiences would probably be satisfied to think that that ghost was actually there, actually a ghost. But of course, to modern audiences, we're not really into the ideas of ghosts. Well, I personally am not. You might be. I prefer to see it as a modern audience as a hallucination, right? And we talked about this when Macbeth sees the dagger. Is it something the witches have put there? Is it a hallucination coming from his mind? He eventually concludes that it is a hallucination. Lady Macbeth here says that in a while that the ghost is a hallucination as well. And that's kind of quite a modern interpretation. You're just hallucinating this. And if we view it in that way, then it seems quite clear that this ghost that's appearing to Macbeth, this hallucination, is somehow some kind of symbol of his feeling of guilt, right? He's had Banquo killed, he's put him in the ground, but he can't actually escape from thinking about him. And he thinks about him so much that he hallucinates a vision of him into being. So that's a kind of modern interpretation. Now, what Shakespeare was really trying to do there, who knows? He's far back in time. Was he trying to say this is an actual ghost, or was he kind of thinking in quite a modern way about how this is a kind of hallucination? Doesn't really matter. What's important is that Macbeth sees the ghost, and this leads to his public unravelling. It's an incredibly powerful moment, and Macbeth just can't deal with it. He says immediately,
"Which of you have done this?"
"What, my good lord?"
"Thou canst not say I did it."
The lords, their response there shows that they don't know what's going on. They can't see the ghost. "Which of you hath done this?" says Macbeth. His thoughts immediately jump to someone's kind of trying to play a trick on him or get their revenge on him somehow. So he is mistrustful. He's paranoid, isn't he? And he becomes more paranoid as the scene and as the play goes on. So these are signs of paranoia. And then when he says, "Thou canst not say I did it," that's incredibly defensive, isn't it? It's as if he's trying to say, I didn't do it, I didn't put it there, but sort of giving away that he's worried about something else that he doesn't want to think people knew he did, which is the murder. And it's as if he's saying, "I didn't murder anybody," without actually saying that, trying to hold it together. And this defensiveness, this denial of his action really fits with what he was fearful of back in Act 1, Scene 7, before he'd even committed the murder, before he was going to the chamber, when he was turning it over in his mind, shall I do this? Shall I not do it? He was saying, if I do it, I'm probably going to get found out. And his response here really shows that that's what he's fearful about. He's fearful about getting found out, and he wants to deny it, and he defends against it. I didn't do it. So that fear from the beginning about the consequences of murder is coming back to him now. And this is the scene where, we really see that you can't escape these consequences. Even if you escape them for a little while, they will come back and get you. Lady Macbeth still trying to hold it together. She tells the lords to sit down. She says, this is a fit. He's been having these fits since he was a child, which is, a bizarre thing to say, really. It's a desperate attempt to keep it together. The lords presumably would have known if Macbeth had been the kind of person to have fits frequently. So the idea that she tries to pass it off there and then as something that he's always had a problem with really just doesn't wash and smacks of desperation. And then she turns to him and she says,
"Are you a man?"
"Aye, and a bold one that dare look on that which might appall the devil."
Oh, proper stuff.
Brilliant. So we're back to that conversation about manliness, aren't we? Are you a man? She brings it up. She prods him with it frequently throughout the play, and she prods him with it here. What does she mean by manliness? Well, he's committed a crime. He's committed regicide. He's also had Banquo dispatched. She's saying, are you strong enough to hold it together in public when you've committed all these crimes? You know, are you a man who can keep everything together in public? That's what she means by manliness here. Sticking with her idea of a man as someone who's cold enough to act in a strong way all the time. And his response saying, I'm a man, I'm able to look at this, he's talking about the ghost, I'm able to look at this which would appall the devil. His response is, yeah, I'm a real man because I can face up to what I've done. And they've, again, as they have previously in the play, they've got slightly different concepts of manliness. She is saying you've got to be strong in all circumstances, in public particularly. He's saying, I am strong, I can face up to what I've done. But he doesn't quite realise that she's talking about you've got to keep it together in public. He's like forgetting about the situation he's in and saying, well, I am a man, I can face this, I'm looking at this thing that looks devilish and I can deal with it. Proper stuff from Lady Macbeth. She's, calling him childish. She's saying, get it together. And then she says, this is the painting of your fear. This is the air-drawn dagger you said you saw. So that's the moment where she says this is a hallucination. And it fits with what an audience believes, what a modern audience believes. And so we would be on Lady Macbeth's side there, and we'd be saying, yes, she's holding it together. She's thinking analytically about it. He's falling apart. He's forgotten the circumstances he's in. He doesn't realise that he's got all these lords around him. He needs to behave in a particular way. So he looks weak in the eyes of the audience, whereas she regains a bit of that power that she had lost in the previous scene when we saw her looking kind of uncertain in front of Macbeth. And so gender is back into play again. She refers to his behaviour here as something that
would well become a woman's story at a winter fire, authored by her grandam.
This behaviour is the kind of behaviour that a woman would display by the fireplace that her grandma had said it's okay to display. In other words, you're being womanly, you're not being a real man. She's the one acting like a man. So we've gone back to this situation where she's in control and he isn't. She's the one fulfilling the gender stereotypes expected of a Jacobean male, of being strong and in control. And he's the one who is being weak in public. And he's even being chastised by his wife for it. And as if to prove the point that he's not being strong enough in public, Macbeth just starts to reveal the murder in the words that he's using. Doesn't care for the fact that he's in front of everybody. He says,
if charnel houses and our graves must send those that we bury back, our monuments shall be the moors of kites.
He's saying, someone that I had buried has come back. Everyone can hear that. He's basically saying, I had someone buried and now they're back again. So he's forgetting, he's giving it away. He's giving the game away. And then at that moment, when he's given the game away, the ghost disappears. That's something that makes you think it might be the witches or it might be an actual ghost. Because as soon as he starts to give himself away, the ghost, if it does have agency, if it's not coming from his head, is satisfied that he's given the game away and disappears. And kind of tricks him, mocks him, in fact, plays with him, disappears. And so there's this sense in which the ghost is kind of playing with Macbeth, is more powerful than Macbeth. Macbeth, in the human world, in the physical realm, has had Banquo killed, but psychologically, Banquo's got the upper hand here, hasn't he? He's toying with Macbeth. Lady Macbeth says,
quite unmanned in folly.
She's harping on this idea of him not being a man, him not being able to be strong in public. And he defends himself.
If I stand here, I saw him.
Fie for shame.
The time has been that when the brains were out, the man would die and there an end. But now they rise again with 20 mortal murders on their crowns and push us from our stools.
As if to prove her correct yet again, when she says you're being stupid, you're being foolish, he goes on talking about how, this guy should be in the ground, but now he's come back from the dead. And everybody can hear this, right? So he's giving himself away. And it again links to what he was talking about in Act 1, Scene 7, when he was fearful of getting discovered. And ironically enough, he can't avoid getting discovered, but it's not because anyone was going to accuse him in public. It's because he gives it away himself. The self-revelation is what reveals his crime to everybody. That's the brilliant thing that Shakespeare gives us in this scene. Yeah, he got away with it. He's the king. But he can't get away with it in his mind. He gives himself away. And it's through these comments that he's making here in this part of the scene where he really gives himself away. You know, Hamlet says it best when he says, "Foul deeds will rise, though all the earth o'erwhelm them to men's eyes." And that's the idea that if a crime is committed, it will surface eventually. You can try and suppress it, you can try and keep it hidden, but it will out. And so that's a theme across various of Shakespeare's plays. And it's an idea in Shakespeare very often that you will give yourself away. You know, in Hamlet, Claudius, who's committed a crime, gives himself away. He's watching a play and he sees the crime that he committed being performed in the play, and he jumps up and he reveals himself as the murderer. So it's this idea that the human mind isn't strong enough to contain the crime within it and has to reveal it. It's not that you will get caught by someone else, but that you will give yourself away. In desperation, Lady Macbeth tries to get him, "Come back, your noble friends do lack you. Come on, come back to the table. We're having a banquet here." And Macbeth comes back and he raises a toast, and he raises his toast to Banquo. You know, again, this kind of moment of pretending that he doesn't know what's going on with Banquo. Again, the dramatic irony for the audience. We do know what's gone on with Banquo. So we see his duplicity. And again, after that moment of duplicity, it repeats the pattern of when the first time the ghost appeared, because the ghost appears again. Again, if we think perhaps the ghost might have some agency, perhaps it is a real ghost, that when it is disrespected by Macbeth in this kind of moment where Macbeth pretends that he cares about Banquo, that's when the ghost appears each time, isn't it? So it's quite interesting, the moment of entry of the ghost, as if to say, hey, no, you don't, Macbeth, and you can't get away with pretending you care about me. And it comes back in again. This time he's even more shaken. He starts trying to boss it around. He says,
"Avaunt and quit my sight. Let the earth hide thee."
You know, get out of here, go away. But of course, he's got no control over it at all. Another example in the play of supernatural figures, here a ghost, previously the witches, which humans attempt to control and fail miserably to control. Just showing you the limitations of human power in the face of these supernatural forces. Again, he reveals that he's been a murderer. He says,
"Thy bones are marrowless, thy blood is cold."
You know, he says, "I know you're dead. I know your blood is cold." It's like he's giving it away to everybody. He knows there's been a crime committed, but he's just talking about it in public. And he carries on with this idea of manliness. And here he gives a different interpretation of what it means to be a man when he says,
"What man dare I dare? Approach thou like the rugged Russian bear, the armed rhinoceros, or the Hyrcan tiger. Take any shape but that."
He's saying, a real man is a strong man who can fight any beast in the physical world. I'll take on a rhinoceros, I'll take on a tiger, but I can't take on this supernatural ghostly figure. So he's saying, I am a man. I could fight with anything that a man would fight with, but I can't deal with this mental tribulation. Can't deal with this trauma, with this spirit. And again, there's a sort of difference between him and Lady Macbeth, where she's saying, you know, you've got to keep it together whatever the circumstances. And he's saying, I'm facing something devilish here, and I'm trying my hardest. Then he starts bossing it around again.
"Hence, horrible shadow, unreal mockery, hence!"
Brilliant. I love those lines. Horrible shadow. A shadow, of course, it's attached to you, isn't it? You can't get rid of it. So there's this sort of fear that he won't be able to shake this shadow. And then he refers to it as an unreal mockery. And there he's saying that it's mocking him. And it kind of implies that it has some agency, right? It is able to laugh at him. And we talked about that earlier in the scene, didn't we? Maybe there is some agency. And when he says that, it disappears again. And it kind of implies that the ghost does have some agency, is able to mock him, is able to disappear. At the moment when he calls it a mockery, it goes. There's a brilliant version of this, the Rupert Gould version, with Patrick Stewart as Macbeth. He actually jumps up on the table to confront the ghost, starts screaming at it, and all the guests, all the lords of the banquet are sitting there thinking, what the heck is going on? And then it disappears, and he kind of adjusts his jacket and adjusts his bow tie, and he says,
"Being gone, I'm a man again."
Which is brilliant. And in that version, you can see he's like, I'm a man again. I'm back to normal. But he's not. He's completely given himself away. He's had a complete mental breakdown in front of everybody. And in that version, he's standing there on the table. And it's hilarious. You know, it really humorously reveals the fact that he hasn't been able to hold it together. And it's a moment, isn't it, also of madness, right? You know, he's totally lost the plot in public. What is madness? It's looking really weird in front of other people, isn't it? That's a kind of definition of madness. And there he is looking incredibly crazy in front of other people. So there's even this idea here from Shakespeare that he's gone mad, mad with guilt, mad for having carried out this crime which he hoped he could get away with. He hoped there would be no consequences, but there are. They've twisted his mind to the point where he is perceived by others as being sick, by his own wife as being sick, as being ill. So Shakespeare's making a point about madness here and how much the human mind can take before it breaks. Clearly, he's not behaving like a man. He's not strong. And in fact, it is Lady Macbeth that asks everybody to leave. Just go. Don't ask. Just leave. And there they are, left there, the two of them. It's the banquet day. They should be celebrating his coronation, but they're in this great big empty banquet hall at the end of the scene. All their guests have deserted them, which is a sign of things to come. This is the moment at which everybody will start turning against him. But he doesn't seem to care. He's sort of unaware of the circumstances of what's going on around him. He's still going on about this idea of being caught. And he says,
"It will have blood, they say. Blood will have blood."
Which again reminds us of Act 1, Scene 7, when he was saying, "We but teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor." You know, he's talking about if we kill someone will come back and get us. He's talking about revenge. He's talking about discovery and revenge. And he can't get away from that idea. And he was thinking about it in Act 1, Scene 7, and he returns to it here. You know, blood will have blood. And then he turns to think about Macduff. Why wasn't Macduff here? Why didn't Macduff come to the coronation? You know, and his paranoia is really lifting off now. And of course, later on, he will attack Macduff's family in an attempt to keep his power. So we see the paranoia, we see the spotting who wasn't there, and we see the plotting carrying on. And in fact, he says,
"I am in blood stepped in so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er."
Which is a brilliant metaphor. He's talking about being right in the middle of a river of blood. I've stepped in so far that to go back would be as tedious, meaning boring or difficult here, as going on. So he's basically saying, I'm right in the middle of a river of blood. I might as well carry on. He commits himself to this path of bloodlust. Tedious is a great word. It does mean difficult here, but it also, of course, is a synonym for boring. You know, it would be as boring to go back as to go on. And there's this sense which becomes more and more prominent as the play goes on, that Macbeth is kind of bored of life. Now that he's killed someone. Earlier on, he said the wine of life is drunk. You know, the pleasure, the joy of life is gone. Later on, he will refer to the future, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, as a series of endless repetitions. And there's a sense that he's lost his joie de vivre, his joy of being alive. And he expresses that here in a brilliant idea. Returning were as tedious as go, so I might as well just continue with my path of ruthless bloodletting. And at the end of the scene, he commits himself further to that route. He says,
"My strange and self-abuse is the initiate fear that wants hard use. We are yet but young indeed."
You know, this is beginner's fear. The problem is that I've not got used to these experiences yet. Once I get more used to it and more experienced, I will stop being so weak. Again, a commitment to brutality, a commitment to the path of tyranny, which others will start to notice after this scene. And it's a chilling end to the scene. Despite falling apart, he comes back and he says, I'm just going to be more brutal. He hasn't learnt his lesson. So what's the point of this scene? Many commentators say that this is the Peripeteia in the drama. And if you're familiar with Aristotle's definitions of what happens in tragedy, Peripeteia is the concept of a turning point. Now, if you look up on the internet, what's the Peripeteia in Macbeth, you're going to get every single website giving you a different answer. What's the turning point in the play? Someone will say it's when he listens to the witches. Someone will say it's when he decides to kill Duncan. Someone will say it's when he kills Duncan. There's all kinds of theories put forward. But I think this scene is a good argument for being the Peripeteia of the play. If we take Peripeteia as being the turning point, everything's going in one direction up till the Peripeteia. And then after that, everything goes in the other direction. So here we have Macbeth's power growing and growing and growing, and then we have this public meltdown, and after that his power decreases. We will see in the next scenes people turning against him, people suspecting him, people going off to form armies against him. And so this really is the turning point when he has this breakdown. So in a dramatic sense, it's an incredibly important scene. It's the public meltdown. It's the time when all his aims and goals of getting and consolidating power start to fall apart. And so Shakespeare puts it in there for that dramatic reason. But of course, there's also a thematic reason why it's in there as well. And we've been talking about it during the video. And it's this idea that there are consequences for the crimes you commit. And they may not be consequences that come to you because other people are trying to get you. The consequences are all in here. You can try to suppress your crimes, you can try to suppress your guilt, but they will rise to the surface in the form of ghosts, in the form of hallucinations that are there reminding you of the guilty deeds and the guilty crimes you've committed, and that won't leave you alone until you give yourself away. And this is the brilliance of Shakespeare, his understanding of the human mind, his realization of what happens in your head after you do something you shouldn't have done. You give yourself away. And this is the key scene for that whole idea in this play. There's the man in public, in the moment of his pomp, in the moment of his crowning, and he gives the game away. He can't hold it together. And after this point, everything falls apart.